This is a record that just came out on March 11th. It's called Rainbows and Kisses. And it's a song that I wrote for my daughter. It basically has the insights that a single father has for his teenage autistic daughter as she grows up in a modern world. Rainbows and Kisses. Little girl, today is your birthday. Sweet 16 and headed to grow. I hope your world will be ready for a young woman with a way all her own. Rainbows and kisses for my little girl. Love wishes as you grow up in this world. Your daddy's little girl.
So here I am with SoulRaye in his studio. SoulRaye, you've been playing music since you were 5 years old, you said, I think.
4 years old.
4 years old, I stand
hmm
corrected.
Yeah. I was with my parents and we were visiting my grandmother down in Virginia. And my grandmother had a piano, but it was outside on the porch. And we were down there for about a week. And the first day, I saw this piano. And that night, we go to sleep. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, I wake up and I get out of the bed in between my mom and dad. And I go outside on the porch. And it's really cold out there. It was like kind of September. It was very cold in the mountains at that time of year. And I started banging on what I called the boom boom. And I woke everybody up
The
in the
boom boom.
house, the boom boom. Woke everybody up, and my mom, my dad, my grandmother, my grandfather, they all come to the door and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm playing the boom boom." Well, I did that, so they said, "Well, it's kind of cold, you better go to bed." So I went back to bed. The next night I did the same thing. I remember my mother and grandmother having a conversation. I was kind of in the living room, and I saw my grandmother standing by the kitchen sink, my mother sitting at a chair on the kitchen table. And I kind of peered around and I looked and I heard just the end of the conversation of my grandmother saying, "Well, maybe you ought to give that boy piano lessons." And my mother saying, "Well, maybe I will." And sure enough, it was the first time I got to know who my mother was, because a couple of months later, my mother said she took me to some woman and I started taking piano lessons. We didn't even have a piano.
Didn't even have a piano. So it all started off with you playing the boom boom. So your first piano that you got, you were about 4, you said?
So I got the piano when I was 5.
5, okay. So the boom boom starts at 4. 5, you have the piano. And you started playing the piano, and what drew you to the piano?
Well, just that fact that there was one at my grandmother's house. I don't know if I had ever seen a piano before, but I just was fascinated with it. And I started banging on it, and I've been banging on it ever since.
You have that. Now, when you were 13 years old, you were telling me that you went to the Manhattan School of Music, and at a very young age. How did you get into the Manhattan School of Music at 13?
Well, my piano teacher, who I had started with when I was 5, told my mother that, she couldn't really teach me anything else, that I needed to find a better teacher. And so my mom kind of hooked me up with an audition, I guess, at Manhattan School of Music, and I went and played for them, and I got accepted, and I had a piano teacher who was a concert pianist. Her name was Jean Graham.
Gene Graham.
Jean
Mm.
Graham, and she was my piano teacher throughout high school, and from 13 to 17, and then I went to college, and I had my piano teacher in college was George Driscoll, and that was when I was in undergraduate school at Ithaca College.
Wow. So quite a history, starting off with the boom boom at 4 to the piano at 5, and then here we are going to college. So at 15 years old, you decided that you were going to record a song, and it was done on 8-track. Now, for those of you who don't know 8-track, it looks like this box with like a big tape cassette, but it doesn't have the 2 holes. on each side for the reel to reel. And you used to, if you see them in old cars from like the 70s, I don't know when they finally went out.
Well, actually, 8-track was reel to reel. It
Reel to
was,
reel.
and it was like half-inch tape, and they were able to get 8 tracks onto that tape, and the machine was 8 tracks,
Yes.
and that's what we had back in those days.
And what was the name of the song that you recorded way back? This is your first recording, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
How Can I? It was called.
And what's the backstory to the song, How Can I?
Well, I was at Manhattan School of Music and I had a theory teacher. His name was Tom Manoff. And Tom Manoff was interested in producing and production and stuff. And when he found out that I was going to Music and Art High School, which
Yeah.
is, very famous, performing arts school in New York. So when he found out I went to that school and that I had some friends and that we had a singing group, he just knew that we were talented. So he offered to produce us. And he paid for everything and took us into a recording studio in Manhattan, and we recorded it, and then he mixed it, and it was my first experience with the in the recording studio, and I loved it. I was hooked. I knew I wanted to do that for the rest of my life.
Wow. Your kind of big break was you're in your mid 20s and you are selected to play keyboard for none other, yes, the I Will Survive recording artist, as we all know her. Disco Queen, a bit. I mean, this is an
Uh,
iconic song.
yes, she was
Gloria
the queen
Gaynor.
of Queen of Disco was her title. Yeah.
How did you become her keyboardist and at one time her music director for the orchestra, the band?
Yes, I was her. I started out as her piano player, and that lasted about 3 months, and I became her musical director. And how that happened, how that came about was, once again, I had gone to music and art high school, and a lot of the guys that I went to school with, instead of going to college, they went directly into the music industry. And by the time I spent 4 years in college and I came back to New York, people were established. They were establishing themselves in the business.
Yeah,
One of my friends, his name was Norbert, and Gloria Gaynor's musical director at the time. And when they were putting together a new band, he just was so thrilled to have me in the band. He says, "Oh, you have to come down." And so I came down and I played and I immediately got hired. And so then he had a big falling out with Gloria about 3 months later, and she asked me if I would become the musical director. And so that's how that all came about.
wow. Now, there was a time and place where you played. I think it was in Mexico. Was it how do you pronounce it again?
Tuxtla,
In
Mexico.
Tucson, Mexico. You played for 50,000 people. And what year are we at this point, roughly?
Yeah, I want to say this is like maybe 1980, 81, something like that.
And you were describing to me as we were chatting earlier on about how when you came on the stage, you couldn't even see the people because of the amount of lighting.
Yeah.
The amount of energy in the stadium must have been overwhelming.
It was incredible. It was incredible. I'll never forget that night. I remember the thing that I remember about that night so poignantly is that it's just the most perfect night temperature wise ever. It's like you were one with the atmosphere or something. And 50,000 people all waiting to hear, her hit songs and the energy, the excitement was just, it was just absolutely amazing for a young man, especially.
Right. You were in the zone. And I
Yeah.
think that that's one of the things that was so amazing about that experience.
I was traveling a lot back in those days, but whenever I was home in New York, I was looking for something to do. I found composing, and I ended up composing a lot of music for industrial films for Fortune 500 companies. Like, in fact, I did the music for the AT&T Museum in New York
Is that right?
City. Yeah, I did the opening exhibit for that. But I also did, music for Northwestern Mutual Life. Well, a bunch of companies back in the day, and they would do these industrial films, which were films that were intended in-house for their employees, training things, training exercises,
Right.
things like that. And so that's what the industrials were. And I was just happened to be living on the block of a company that was doing these movies. And I had a friend, he was walking down the block one day, and I said, "Oh my God, I haven't seen Bill in a long time." So I ran out the door and said, "Yo, Bill." And we turned around and we started talking. He told me that he was working for this company that was located on this block
Yes.
and that they were doing these industrial films. And he says, "Man, we've been looking for a composer. We'd really love to bring you on." And so I met all the people that were involved and I became a composer for that company and for a couple of years doing these movies. Yeah.
Wow. And at this point, you're about how old?
I want to say I'm like, late 20s, early 30s, something
Like
like
20.
that.
So, started with the boom boom, to the
Hmm.
piano,
Hmm.
to, Manhattan School of Music, recording your first song on 8 track,
Right.
recording the song "How Can I," and then we're playing with Gloria Gaynor. Now, you've toured Europe, I'm sure. You've toured
Hmm.
Mexico, South America.
Exactly.
Such an inspiring thing to do. Did you have time to kind of take this in, or was it just kind of a whirlwind?
I would say it was kind of a whirlwind. I just remember feeling like so lucky. Mm. But it just kept going on. I just, I mean, I went from Gloria Gaynor to Denise Williams, to Darryl Hall, Richie Haven, so many people. It was just really wonderful experience. And one of the greatest things about it was that as a very young man, I'm traveling around the world and I'm seeing the world.
You
And
are seeing the
I'm
world.
seeing the world. And I remember saying to myself, oh my God, not only am I making music sometimes for 50,000 people and enjoying all that energy and what that felt like, contributing to people, making people happy. And it was, just a really beautiful experience. But the experience of traveling around the world, different cultures, meeting people, spending time, everybody wanted to spend time with us. So it was very
Absolutely.
easy to meet people and spend time with them and get to know a little bit about their families. It was just really, really beautiful experience.
Right. And the people that you were playing with post Gloria.
Oh, so yeah, so Denise Williams, I was with Denise Williams in 1984. We had a very big record called Let's Hear It for the Boy, which is from
I
the
do
Footloose
remember this.
album, the
Yes.
Footloose movie with Kevin Bacon, I
Hello,
think.
Kevin. They say we're 3 people removed from Kevin Bacon. You've heard that theory,
Well, he
right?
was my neighbor in New York too,
Okay, so
He lived
oh,
around the corner from me, him and his
look
wife,
at this.
Kira
Okay,
Sedgwick.
so you, me, Kevin Bacon. That is true.
Yeah, oh yeah, they
No,
lived around the corner from me. Yeah, well, around the corner and a few blocks south. Yeah,
right,
they
but I
lived on
mean,
Central
I'm
Park
I'm
West.
third removed from Kevin Bacon from you. It's true. So, yeah, so getting into this, and these people who have uber fame, road life, right? Being on tour buses. These tours sometimes last, could be a year, could be more, right?
Well,
How do you survive the road life? How did you do that?
Well, I it just kind of agreed with me. I didn't really have a problem being on the road. I know that a lot of people kind of, put out a little bit about being on the road, but that wasn't the case with me. I actually, it kind of agreed with me. I was okay with it. So I spent many, many, many years on the road. But very often my tours weren't that long. Sometimes we would go out for as little as 3 weeks. Other times we were out for like, 3 months.
You had a good home life,
I had a good
road
home.
life,
Mhm.
home road life
I was
balance.
always on the road though. I'd come back to New York and I'd be around for a week or two or three and then back out on the road again.
Right. Didn't play with Willie Nelson though, because he was on the road. So that song rings true to me, I think, at this
Mm,
point.
yeah, right, exactly. On the road again.
On the road again, right?
Yeah.
You also have some music. You've recorded a couple of albums, CDs, if you will. One of the albums that I listened to, actually, I listened to a few of them. One was off the O2 Mystic Gypsies album. The song Mystic Gypsies, very rock, has that pop feel, solid lyric, effervescent voice. Your lead singer was incredible. What kind of inspired you to write that song for Mystic Gypsies?
Well, that's a good question because that lead singer, was my ex-wife. We were married for basically we were the Mystic Gypsies. We were traveling all around the world. And so it kind of was like, inspired by our lives. We were kind of like the Mystic Gypsies is before,
You lived it.
yeah, we lived
Yeah,
that, yeah,
yeah.
before our daughter was born, yeah.
And then, there was another really great track on that, Could You Be Loved? Had a reggae feel. What kind
Hmm.
of inspired that one?
Well, that's a wonderful question because I've always been like an arranger. I've always seen myself in that role because I did so much arranging for so many people.
You did.
Back in my days, when I wasn't on the road in New York, I sometimes was playing auditions for Broadway people and or doing arrangements for various artists, some of them, on Broadway, some of them, recording artists or whatever. So I always saw myself as an arranger and I was pretty good at it. And I remember I started playing around with that song and something very interesting came out, which was completely different from what Bob Marley did. And I just really kind of where it went for me and it was like this is something we should record, and so we ended up recording it. Yeah.
How is it different from Bob's work on that particular song?
Well, particularly when it goes to that section, the road to life is rocky, and you may stumble too. When it goes to that part there, I kind of had this idea of doing it in double time, and that's what we did, which is completely different from Bob. Bob kept the same kind of groove going when
He
he.
did. There was a
Mm,
certain rhythm and tempo, and you up tempoed it, if that's a word.
yes, I double time.
The other things that I really liked, there was the '09 album, the song Butterfly, very effervescent, has that really, just very warm vocal.
Yeah, but this was the early 2000s. We were doing a show at Joe's Pub. Now, we were living in California at the time.
Yep.
So this is probably like maybe 2006, something like that.
Yeah.
And in New York called Joe's Pub.
Joe's Pub, New
Yeah.
York City.
Yeah, it's
What year are we about?
I think this is around 2006. So how we came about to do that song was I wanted to invite some people to join us. I had done in New York when I lived in New York, I had for like over 10 years I had the biggest open mic running in New York. It was called the Soul Gathering. And we had
SoulRaye had the Soul Gathering.
yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
I like it. Very catchy.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I would have people like David Lee Roth came through there. Chaka Khan has come through.
Wait, they performed at an open mic?
They performed, well, they came to my open mic and performed. Yeah, exactly.
Chaka Khan
Chaka Khan, yeah.
and Dave, did they come together?
No, no, these are
Okay.
two separate
Now,
days.
could you imagine them coming in the same night? I think the electricity would have been so intense, you would have shut the generators down
Yeah.
with those two individuals.
Yeah, so
Wow.
David Lee Roth came with Nile Rodgers. Nile Rodgers from Chic, and he also had a very big hit a couple years ago too. So Nile Rodgers was a great producer. So he came. So the two of them performed at the open mic that I had, and Chaka. It was a different venue, but it was still the same Soul Gathering. And Chaka was there one night, and she got up and sang with us. And we also had like legendary musicians like Bernard Purdie came and played drums, sat in the drums, and we also had this incredible Cuban percussionist named Potato Valdez. And this guy's been on the cover of Percussion magazine. He was a legendary Cuban percussionist, and he came literally every single Sunday for about a year. But there were so many percussionists that just idolized this guy, so they would come every week. I'd have all these percussionists there, and we called them the Percussion Posse, and they all followed Potato Valdez, and
Oh my goodness.
and we had these amazing jam sessions with all these percussion. It was just
Okay, so this
phenomenal.
is not karaoke right now. This is people coming in. Could it be poetry?
Yes, we did everything. We had
Okay.
people would come in and do poetry. They would do singing. They would play instruments. It was just I kept it really wide
Maybe some
open.
stand up, perhaps. I don't know.
Stand up. No, we yes, we had a couple of people who didn't have any music and they sat up and they did stand up, but that was rare. That didn't happen
Right.
very often.
Incredible.
And so I'm sorry. So
No,
going
go
back to
for
the
it.
going back to the original story.
Yes, going back.
So I had met M doing these open mics, and when she first came to New York, and this woman was a phenomenal singer and became a really good friend of mine. We learned the song. So my band in San Diego at the time,
Yep.
we learned the song so that M could perform it with us. And in the process of learning it, Kristen, who was our lead singer, she sang the song. And we loved the song so much. So we performed it at Joe's Pub with M singing it. But we loved Kristen singing on like we decided to record it for our album Underground Soul. And so that's how we ended up doing Butterfly, which was one of the two songs I believe on that record that weren't original.
One of the other ones that I loved just had just so much funk, and it was a party song, if you will, celebratory type of song, was the SoulRaye Party.
It was a SoulRaye party. Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a funky song.
Another one that was obviously was written by Sir Paul McCartney was there's another
Come
one.
Together.
Yeah,
Yeah,
hold on.
we recorded
Let
Come
me read
Together,
this here.
yeah. Mhm.
One of the other ones that I think it might have been the last track was "Come Together." Obviously, a Beatles song. You guys totally redeveloped, and sorry, Paul McCartney, if you ever see this, but it was more sped up, and it had just such had a drive behind the song that the other one's more laid back. This one was more of a driving force,
Mhm.
and I thought that was such a great one. Coming back to 2023, your last recording, Rainbow and Kisses. You wrote that for your daughter when you welcomed me into your lovely home. You played it. Songs, I feel, are born and they just kind of take a life unto themselves. So this song, which was very special, is about wishing your daughter the absolute best as she comes into womanhood. And how do we get rainbows and butterflies? How does that all just kind of come
Oh,
together?
that's a great question. Well, what happened was my ex-wife decided to leave the family. Lyric and I were caught very off guard, and one of our healing processes was we started to send each other rainbows and kisses emojis. And we did this constantly, and it really helped us to feel a little bit better. And
Therapeutic.
yes, it was
Mm.
therapeutic, and after a few months of doing, I said to myself, "Oh my God, I have to write this song, Rainbows and Kisses." So Lyric was she was very excited about it, and I remember I had the idea, but I didn't do anything about it initially. And Lyric was like, "Daddy, how's Rainbows and Kisses going?" And I was like, "Well, I haven't started." She says, "Dad, well, you got to get started. You got to write that song." And so it ended up that I wrote Rainbows and Kisses, and it's about the insights that a father has for his, a single father
Yes.
has for his teenage autistic daughter as she's growing up in a modern world.
Yes.
Yeah, this world, that has social media and all that stuff. It's not the world that I grew up in.
I'm old enough to remember the cassette tapes, right? I
Hmm.
remember my parents had an 8-track tape in one of their cars, gosh, in the
Hmm.
late
Right,
70s.
exactly.
How technology has changed. It was interesting. I did an interview on glam rock fans, and I was interviewing people that were at last year Motley Crue and Joan Jett and Poison and Def Leppard, and a lot of these fans were there when the records were out, when the cassettes, and we talked about how everything's been revolutionized. I used to go to Tower Records,
Tower
right?
Records,
We go to
baby.
Tower Records, and you would, go home and you would take the plastic off the thing, and you used to smell. I can still smell the vinyl, and then that crackling sound, right? Now I can just go to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music. It's there instantaneously. We were almost treasure hunters looking for that,
Exactly,
right? And
exactly.
going down to a rare record store. I mean, you can still find records. Out of curiosity, the sound of a record versus now digital. Do you have a preference, or do you just enjoy them both? I know that might be a difficult question.
Well, not so much. For me,
Yeah,
uh, you know, I enjoy streaming music. I still have a record collection. I have vinyls in my living room. I listen to vinyl music all the time,
yes.
and I love it. Yeah, it's very different from what we are doing today, even from CDs and all like that. There's a certain warmness that is on vinyl that is captured by vinyl. Something that I really, really love to listen to vinyl.
It makes
Um,
the experience more intimate.
well, it was just so great. You buy an album and you had a whole story there. You could look at the pictures and read the story, the musicians, all that stuff that was on. Now all of
All
that's
the
missing.
liner notes and the
Yes.
backstory.
And as you said, it was like treasure hunting. I remember going to there was Disco Mania, I think it was called.
Disco Mania.
Yeah, it was a mom pop record store in the West Village in New York City. And I
Yeah.
used to go there and buy my records back in the day. And it was like treasure hunting. You would be going, "Oh, wow, what is this?" And then you start reading the liner notes and you see who's on it and say, "Oh man, I want to hear this because there's some great musicians on this record."
Yeah, it was something else. The pictorial art on the album sometimes would draw you to this because it was such an intriguing photo. We really don't get that anymore. And so there is a sweetness to this experience. One of my favorite movies about music is Almost Famous, about this kid who's a rock
Oh, yeah, yeah,
journalist,
yeah.
right, from his high school. And his sister told him, listen to this particular Who album. I don't know if it was Tommy, and put a candle on. And it's like your room turned into this like listening like temple,
Yeah, right.
right? This musical temple. Now, it's still great to be able to access music at any moment for whatever I feel, but there was a very special time, and I think you still can do that
Yeah.
if you find a record. One of the other things I'd like to talk about, which is very dear to my heart, is soundtracks. You, in 2018, got your master's degree I believe it was in film school, right? 2018 film school. Is this from Manhattan School of Music?
No, from NYU.
From let me read that.
Yeah.
So in 2018, you got your master's degree from NYU in film score. You have done some film scores, and you've done things for the ballets for certain, like even for was it the National Conservatory for Ballet in
National Ballet of Canada.
National Ballet of Canada. You wrote music for them, and then there was also something that was really special that I listened to on your webpage for after Saturn. It was a Australian movie short that you even were nominated at one of their uh, national broadcast awards, and you wrote this incredible jazz music, and there was a really intimate dialogue. How did you write that piece?
Often what happens is that when they're making movies, sometimes there's a template, which is a music template, which is like kind of the music supervisor puts together music that might work well
Yeah,
for a scene. And in this case, they had found a track, beautiful, beautiful recording by McCoy Tyner, I believe, or maybe it was John Coltrane, but McCoy Tyner was the piano player on it, and it was called "My Favorite Things," I think it was. So anyway, they had this music that they really wanted to use in the film,
yeah,
but it was too expensive for them, so they couldn't get the rights to it. So they asked my collaborator, her name is Prue, we could do something like that. And so I actually loved McCoy Tyner. I spent a lot of time listening to his music in my formative years as a
yeah,
musician, so to
yeah,
speak. Well, anyway, it was very easy for me to come up with something that was kind of similar, but yet different enough, and it fitted the scene perfectly. The director really, really, really loved it. And yeah, I sat here right in that studio, right here, kind of created that piano groove that I sent to Prue. And she had a drummer, come on board, and he played his part, and then she played a little trumpet on top of it, and it kind
sure,
of like that. That's how it came about. And we got nominated for Best Original Score at the St. Kilda's Film Festival in Australia.
yeah.
We didn't win, but we got nominated, and the nomination was it felt pretty good.
That's an honor. I think music is such a driving force. I mean, imagine Indiana Jones without that theme.
John Williams.
My favorite composer, John Barry, for all the Bond film. We all know the sound of that spy when Bond walks across
Hmm.
and points his gun at the screen. We know adventures with us, right? It just tells a story. If you take the music out, like Out of Africa with Robert Redford,
Hmm.
and he's flying over Africa and in that biplane, and it's just such a luscious, beautiful sound. If we would have just heard the roaring of the biplane, it wouldn't have done it justice. Incredible. If somebody has, there's a lot of people who have talent, but they never allow themselves to record. They maybe have written part of a song. Maybe they wrote a song, but they're afraid to share this. How can they get past this barrier so they can share their gift with the world?
Well, I find myself saying to some of my students, I teach piano and production and voice, but I have to remind my students sometimes to be kind to yourself, relax, be kind to yourself. And what I mean by that, give yourself permission. Do not beat yourself up. Do not, how is this going to compare to this person or this person? And the truth is, there's always going to be people that compare you to who, this one or that one or whatever. But as an artist, it is really, really about finding your own voice and then trying to capture that. That is the hardest part, capturing your own voice. First of all, developing your voice. You have to give yourself license. You have to be kind to yourself to allow yourself to go on to that journey. There's so much magic in the journey alone, but
Magic in the journey. And that's what music is about.
mm,
If I feel this song today, if I feel this mood, I'm putting a soundtrack, a sound. I think music, when you go to a live show and there's a song that you've listened to, and then you go to a show and hear it live, it's reborn.
mm,
And I've heard interviews with certain artists. It was really interesting. The guitarist from U2, The Edge, would say sometimes when they're playing themselves, these songs that they've recorded, that their fans are screaming the lyrics back. And that was something that was going on in their life that they could relate to. And
mm.
it's just it's a powerful experience. And music is appropriate for any environment. when babies are born, baptisms, funerals,
Soundtrack of our lives.
soundtrack of our lives.
Mhm.
Well, sir, it was such a rich experience to be here today.
Thank you,
so much.
Ricardo.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it. So check out his music, and if you'd like to, you can find him on Spotify, SoulRaye Music, or you can find him on your website. What is our website?
Yeah, soulraye.com, SoulRaye.com. Or I'm SoulRaye. You can stream me or buy me at iTunes or any of the online music venues or stream services out there. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. All right, SoulRaye, thanks so much for having me on your show. Well, hello again. This is Ricardo del California. Thank you so much for watching my show. It means so much to me. If you like what you saw today, please subscribe, and I'll see you real soon.